It was a moment that would haunt Sandra Mitchell for years. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry," she whispered as she lay there, trembling, on the Family Feud stage. The embarrassment burned through her as she felt like she'd ruined everything. Her family's big moment, the spotlight, the chance they'd worked so hard for. But then, in that very instant, something happened that would change her life forever. Steve Harvey knelt down beside her, looked her in the eyes, and said 5 words that would resonate in her heart for years to come. "You're going to be okay." Steve had no idea that helping Sandra up from that stage would mark the beginning of a 7-year journey. A journey that not only transformed Sandra's life, but also touched countless others. This story isn't just about a television moment gone wrong. It's about what happens when real compassion meets the desperate need of a person, and how one man's refusal to let the cameras define his character led to a legacy that continues to change lives today. The atmosphere at the Atlanta studio was electric as 2 families gathered, ready to compete on Family Feud. The Mitchell family had traveled 12 long hours from rural Mississippi. It was their first time on a game show, their first time in a television studio, and they were nervous but excited. Sandra, 34, stood alongside her children and sister, trying her best to stay calm. This was supposed to be a fun experience, a chance to win some money, maybe pay off some bills, and give her kids a memory they'd never forget. But deep down, Sandra was fighting a war no one could see. For the past 2 years, she'd been juggling 3 jobs, cleaning offices late at night, stocking shelves before dawn, and watching her kids in the afternoons. Her ex-husband had disappeared, leaving her with $40,000 in debt and 3 children to raise alone. Sandra hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in months. "Mama, you okay?" her 10-year-old son Marcus asked, noticing the tremble in her hands. "I'm fine, baby," Sandra lied, forcing a smile. The truth was, she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Every dollar had gone to feeding her kids, keeping the lights on, and making minimum payments on credit cards that never seemed to shrink. She'd fainted twice in the last month but hadn't told anyone. She couldn't afford to miss work. She couldn't afford to seem weak. If you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring you more inspiring stories just like this one. Now let's continue. As the familiar Family Feud theme, music played and Steve Harvey took his place on stage, Sandra tried to focus. This was their chance. If they could win even a few $1,000s, it could change everything. The Mitchell family had just nailed the #1 answer on the board. Sandra felt a spark of hope. Maybe they had a real chance. But as the game continued, the studio lights seemed to burn brighter and the room grew stiflingly hot. Sandra's vision blurred. She gripped the podium, trying to steady herself. "Sandra, you're up," Steve called cheerfully. "We need an answer for things that make you smile." Sandra tried to gather her strength, but all she could manage was a faint, My kids." Her voice was barely audible, swallowed by the microphone. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear that," Steve said, walking closer. Sandra tried again, but instead of words, everything went black. The next thing she knew, she was on the floor. The audience gasped, but Sandra only whispered, I'm sorry. When Sandra regained consciousness, she saw Steve kneeling beside her, his hand on her shoulder. His voice was calm and reassuring. "Hey there, you're going to be okay," he said gently. "Don't apologize. You've got nothing to be sorry about." Medics rushed to the stage, but Steve stayed right there by her side. "Can you tell me your name?" the medic asked. "Sandra Mitchell," she whispered. "I'm so embarrassed. I ruined your show." Steve looked at her with compassion in his eyes. "Sandra, you didn't ruin anything. But tell me, when's the last time you ate something?" Sandra's face flushed with shame. "Yesterday morning. And before that, I don't remember." At that moment, Steve realized this wasn't just exhaustion or stage fright. Sandra wasn't just overwhelmed by the spotlight. She was fighting a battle for survival. As the paramedics prepared to take Sandra to the hospital, Steve made a decision that would surprise everyone. "I'm going with her," he told his producer. "Steve, we have another family to tape with. We can do it tomorrow." "This is more important," Steve replied. And so, he climbed into the ambulance with Sandra, her children, and rode with them to the hospital. During that 20-minute ride, Sandra opened up. She told Steve about her 3 jobs, the crushing debt, the sleepless nights, and the constant fear that she'd lose her home. "Why didn't you tell someone you were struggling?" Steve asked, his voice gentle. "Who would I tell?" Sandra replied, tears welling up in her eyes. "What could they do? I just have to keep working. I have to keep fighting. My kids depend on me." Steve was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would change both their lives. "You don't have to fight alone anymore." At the hospital, doctors confirmed what Steve had already suspected. Sandra was severely malnourished and exhausted. She had been living on little more than coffee and sheer willpower for weeks. While Sandra rested, Steve sat with her children in the waiting room. He could see the fear in Marcus's eyes as the 8-year-old tried to be brave. "Is Mama going to be okay?" Destiny, her 8-year-old daughter, asked. "She's going to be more than okay," Steve promised, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I'm going to make sure of that." The next morning, Steve returned to the hospital with a full breakfast for the entire family and a plan that would change their lives. "Sandra," he said as she ate her first real meal in days, "I want to help you. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because I see something in you that reminds me of my own mama." "I can't accept charity," Sandra replied, shaking her head. "This isn't charity," Steve said firmly. "This is family taking care of family. You became family the moment you trusted me enough to tell me your story." Steve's first step was to help Sandra with immediate relief. He paid off all $40,000 of her debt. But he didn't stop there. "I don't just want to solve your problem," Steve said as they sat in his office a week later. "I want to help you build a life where these problems can't happen again." He enrolled Sandra in a business management course at a local community college and covered all the costs. He connected her with a financial advisor to teach her about budgeting, saving, and investing. Most importantly, Steve helped Sandra realize that her struggles didn't define her. Her resilience did. "You've been surviving," Steve told her. "Now I want to teach you how to thrive." But Steve's support didn't stop with money and education. He became a mentor, a father figure, and a constant source of encouragement. He called Sandra every week, checking in, celebrating her victories, and helping her navigate the challenges she faced. "Some days I still can't believe this is real," Sandra confessed to Steve 6 months later. "I keep waiting to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's not a dream, Sandra," Steve reassured her. "This is what your life looks like when someone believes in you." Sandra's confidence grew with each passing day. She began to dream bigger. "I've been thinking about starting a house cleaning business," she told Steve one evening. "It may sound small, but..." "It doesn't sound small at all," Steve interrupted. "It sounds like freedom. It sounds like you taking control of your future." With Steve's help, Sandra developed a business plan, connected with other entrepreneurs, and received the startup capital she needed. In September 2018, 18 months after, collapsing on Family Feud, Sandra Mitchell launched Mitchell's Cleaning Services. Her first client? Steve Harvey's production company. "I want to be your first customer," Steve insisted. "Not because I'm doing you a favor, but because I know you'll do incredible work." Sandra's attention to detail, work ethic, and genuine care for her clients quickly earned her a reputation for excellence. Word spread throughout Atlanta's business community about the cleaning service that treated every client like family. By 2020, Sandra's business had grown to employ 12 people, single mothers she personally trained and mentored. "Every woman I hire, I see myself in," Sandra explained to a reporter. "I remember what it felt like to work 3 jobs and still not be able to pay the bills. I want to make sure no woman has to go through that alone." In 2021, Sandra's life took another turn when Steve came to her with a new idea. "I want you to help me start something," he said. "A foundation that helps single mothers start their own businesses. You've proven it works. Now let's help it work for hundreds of other women." The Second Chance Sisters Foundation was born, with Sandra as its director. The foundation has provided business training, startup capital, and mentorship to hundreds of women. launching over 150 small businesses across the Southeast. Sandra's transformation impacted her children in profound ways. Marcus, now 16, worked part-time for his mother's company while maintaining straight A's in school. Destiny, now 14, started a non-profit called No More Empty Fridges to help families in crisis. Even 6-year-old Isaiah, who didn't fully understand the depth of the situation, volunteered at foundation events. In 2024, Sandra returned to the Family Feud stage, not as a contestant, but as Steve's special guest. Steve shared her story with the audience, noting how she had gone from a woman struggling to survive to a successful business owner and community leader. "Your worst moments don't define your future," Steve said, his voice filled with emotion. "Your response to those moments does." As Sandra stood there, surrounded by applause, she thought about the single mothers in the audience, still fighting invisible battles. After the show, she spoke with them, offering encouragement and connecting them with resources through her foundation. This was why everything had happened, Sandra realized. Not just for her own salvation, but so she could help save others. Today, Sandra's story is a case study in resilience and entrepreneurship. Her business has expanded, her foundation continues to grow, and her legacy is one of compassion, support, and second chances. Success isn't about the money I make, Sandra reflects from her office. A photo of her on that Family Feud stage, being helped to her feet on the wall behind her. It's about the women who call me at midnight because they need someone who understands. It's about the children who now have stable homes because their mothers have stable businesses. It's about proving that one moment of compassion can change everything. And when Steve Harvey reflects on the moment Sandra collapsed on stage, he still says the same thing. "That was when I learned what it really means to lift someone up."